All right, so time to finish up the immune system. So I kind of really like this image here. So we're going to talk about what can go wrong. But right here in this yellow band, you see that it says balanced immune system equals optimal effectiveness. And this is really key. There's a small range in which our immune system works very well, right? But if it underreacts, we end up with some very serious problems. Cancer, hepatitis, HIV, shingles, tuberculosis, right? All of those because our immune system is not strong enough to fight off those different diseases, and or it's compromised in some way. Or we get infections that we normally would never have gotten. On the other side, it's not good if our immune system is primed either. You can have autoimmune problems. You can see the list: diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, on and on. Or we have allergic reactions, the joy of everyone, particularly this March here in Arizona, right? So let's talk a little bit more about these. All right, so let's talk about underreaction first. So you probably all have heard at least of HIV, and you're probably somewhat familiar with it. It's a retrovirus, right, with a protein coat wrapped around by an envelope of glycoproteins. So what I don't know is how familiar everyone is with the term retrovirus. So I guess the term retro, whenever we say retro, it means it's like a throwback, right? It's kind of something to the past. And it's kind of what it means here too. So most viruses will have DNA inside of them that they somehow inject into the host's DNA. So every time the host cell divides or the DNA is read, the viral DNA is also being read. And therefore those proteins are being expressed, and then you're building more viruses, like the host cell actually builds more viruses. Well, in the case of a retrovirus, what ends up happening is that HIV actually has RNA. So what it's actually going to inject is RNA, and it also has an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. So let's see if I can get my pen here to write for you. Oops. One second. So there's an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. And this reverse transcriptase is going to convert the RNA, and I'm just going to put a V in front of it for viral RNA, for this HIV virus RNA, and it'll convert that into viral DNA. It converts into DNA, so it goes backwards, right? And then this DNA will get incorporated into the host's DNA, and then again, it'll get replicated, and the proteins will then be expressed, and you start building a lot more viruses. Now, one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is this fact that it's a retrovirus is one of the reasons why HIV is so successful in eluding attempts by the medical field to come up with a cure for it. This retrovirus and this reverse transcriptase makes a lot of mistakes when it's converting the RNA into DNA. There's all these little mutations. Now, not all of them are good, but the ones that are cause a slightly different variant of the HIV virus to arise, again making it very difficult to then target medicines that kill them all, right? All right. So basically, the way it's going to work is that HIV actually enters T cells, and in particular, not all T cells, but specifically helper T cells. Okay. It then sheds its protein coat. That DNA is produced from the RNA, right, the reverse transcriptase. And basically, the T cell will produce these viruses until it's destroyed, right? And then you get sicker and sicker until you end up with the condition of AIDS. And we'll talk a little more about that in a second. Right? However, it's interesting is that some people have a mutation called the CCR5 delta 32 mutation. So here are three different conditions. This first one on the left, what we see here is these purple are the host cell. So it's like your cell. Okay, and what you're seeing here in its DNA is it has two normal copies for this CCR5 receptor. So here you're seeing, so again, it's a helper T cell, so you see it's expressing that CD4 receptor, that's sort of this gray, and that CD4 receptor has another part to it called the CCR5 part. And when that's normal, that HIV virus can dock with it and it gets brought into the cell, and then it begins, again, the reverse transcriptase process. Now, some people have a single mutation of that CCR5 receptor. So basically, they have a good copy and a bad copy. So what ends up happening is the actual CCR5 that's being expressed is slightly modified. So the HIV is still able to bind with it, but it takes a bit longer. It's not as fast. So again, an individual exposed to HIV, it's a normal infection, but it progresses much more slowly because the HIV virus has more difficulty docking with the helper T cells. Now, some people have 2 copies of the mutation. So basically, their CCR5 is completely modified, making it impossible for the HIV virus to actually bind to it. So these individuals, if they were infected with HIV, they do not actually get the virus. The virus basically gets broken down by the body because, again, the virus cannot dock, cannot infect the T cells, and therefore the person does not get sick. Kind of nifty. And what we see is that there's an actual gradient, an allele frequency gradient for that mutation, for that CCR5 delta 32. So you'll see areas that are in red in the hot colors, you have a lot more people or a larger density of people that have that mutation. And I think scientists are still trying to figure out what in human history, what other disease could have occurred in those areas that sort of gave people the immunity to, or I should say, what disease occurred that killed off everyone else except for the people that had the CCR5 delta 32 mutation on both genes, thereby, allowing them to survive that historic disease, and then giving them that immunity today. All right, so there's what the letters for AIDS stand for: acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And again, basically what's going on is that HIV has reduced the body's ability to fight off different infections. So what ends up happening is that other illnesses that normally your body would have been very easily defended against now basically take over and eventually kill the person. And just to be very clear, you cannot get HIV from air, water, saliva, sweat, tears, insects, pets, shared toilets, food, drinks. You can see here the documented cases of transmission are way of blood, semen, vaginal secretions, and breast milk from infected nursing mother. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the overreactions. Okay. We have hypersensitivity reactions, and when you're hypersensitive, you're often, we call that being allergic to something. Okay, and the things in this case, we don't necessarily call them antigens, we call them allergens. Okay. All right, 4 basic types of hypersensitivity. Type 1, anaphylactic reaction, most common. And what's going on here is that basically the first time someone is exposed to a certain allergen, their body produces that IgE antibody. And then that IgE antibody is going to bind to the surface of mast cells and basophils. Okay? So basically, again, they're exposed to something, and those IgE antibodies will bind to the surface of mast cells and basophils. So what this means is that the next time the person is exposed to whatever that allergen was, that allergen will attach to the IgE antibody already present, and as a result, that's going to trigger those mast cells and basophils to release histamine, prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and kinins. So when what those guys do is they're going to cause vasodilation, which increases blood capillary permeability, and it also will increase smooth muscle contractions in the airways of the lungs, as well as mucus secretion. So I'm sure you guys have all heard of anaphylactic shock, right? When someone's throat swells up and they can't breathe, and you have to give them an EpiPen, right? So that's basically what's happening. And again, you're doing the EpiPen so that you can increase the diameter of the air passageway so they don't, suffocate. And then it also helps with heart rate that stabilize the heart rate as well. Okay. Type 2, cytotoxic. This is basically what we see when we have a bad blood transfusion, and we've already discussed that type, so I'm not going to go into great detail. Okay, in the type 3 reaction, basically this is going to involve antigens and antibodies and the complement system. So what ends up happening is there's a certain amount of those antigen-antibody interactions that are going to occur, and the IgA, IgM, these immune complexes are sometimes small enough to escape phagocytosis by monocytes and stuff, but they become trapped in the basement membrane of blood vessels. So, remember the basement membrane, like at the very bottom of epithelial tissue? So they get trapped in that basement membrane. And when they get trapped, they activate the complement system. If you remember back, we talked about the complement system, and they essentially cause inflammation. This type 3 reaction is basically rheumatoid arthritis. Okay. And then type 4 reaction, or this delayed hypersensitivity reaction. These occur when allergens are taken in by these antigen presenting cells, and then they're going to migrate to the lymph, and they present the allergen to the T cells, which then begin to proliferate. So some of these T cells go back to the site, and they start producing something called a gamma interferon, right, which then activates macrophages and other things, and that stimulates the inflammation response. So tuberculosis works this way. Actually, poison ivy even works this way. Yeah, so tuberculosis. So in type 1 diabetes, what happens is the immune system attacks cells in the pancreas that make insulin. So it attacks beta cells in the pancreas. And I think without insulin, body can't use sugar found in blood. So some of the symptoms of type 1 diabetes is increased thirst. Basically what's happening is, since sugar is not being taken out of the blood, the body is interpreting that as blood being thickened or higher osmotic gradient in the blood. So your thirst is increased. Similarly, the kidneys are trying to flush out all the kidneys are flushing out all the excess sugar, and again, there's an osmotic concentration there. So as you're flushing out the extra sugar, you're also pulling water, so there's lots of urination. So that goes along with bedwetting in little kids. Naturally, the cells are being starved, so brain gets that signal, so it interprets it as people being very hungry. There's weight loss, and you know what it's like when you're hungry: irritable, mood changes. You're going to be tired, and then it can even lead to blurred vision, and even yeast infections in females. Okay. Rheumatoid arthritis. So basically, it's when the immune system attacks the synovium, or the lining around your joints. So let's just take a quick look at these pictures. Here we have a normal joint, right? And if you remember back to 201, right, we have our two bones. They end in that hyaline cartilage. There's this nice synovial capsule around it. There's synovial fluid bathing that joint. And then that synovial membrane lining the inside of that synovial capsule is what is producing the synovial fluid. Now here's a little bit of a comparison between osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. So in osteoarthritis, you can see that cartilage is worn away, and that's what causes the pain of osteoarthritis, right? Bone grinding on bone. But in rheumatoid, what you're seeing here is that synovial membrane is what's being attacked, right? There's inflammation, there's attack, and essentially that's going to cause tendons to wear. Let's see, I think it's next. So it causes tendons, ligaments to wear, and it also, that inflammation, bone only knows how to build more bone. So it's going to respond to the inflammation by growing more bone, and that's really where you start seeing people's fingers and toes becoming very gnarled looking. Multiple sclerosis, right, we had talked a bit about this before, in 201. So the immune system is attacking the myelin sheath around neurons, and even the neurons themselves. So not surprisingly, you have lots of issues with fatigue, cognitive impairment, depression, anxiety, unstable mood. As soon as you start affecting the brain, that's going to affect your ability to speak, your ability to control your muscles. Sensory neurons can be attacked, so there's pain, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of different issues in multiple sclerosis because of the immune system gone awry. So last but not least is lupus. So let's talk a little bit about that. And if I can get my slide to advance. Basically what's going on here, and I can't for some reason. Come on. Again, it's simply an inflammatory disease. Well, not simply, but it's an inflammatory disease. Your body, your immune system is attacking its own tissues and organs. This time it's the B cells that are attacking the different tissues of the body. And basically it'll attack anything. And you can kind of see all the different symptoms common in lupus. There's no cure. There is a way to help try to control it by trying to control the B cells. And that's it for the immune system. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. See you next time.